Welcome to the Clear the Shelf podcast with Chris and Chris, the show that meets at the intersection of education and entertainment to discuss online arbitrage, retail arbitrage, wholesale, and all facets of selling on Amazon. We'll bring you news, tactics, strategies, insights, stories, and interviews to help you grow your Amazon business. And now, here are your hosts, Chris Grant and Chris Rasick. What's up, Amazon sellers, and welcome back to the Clear the Shelf podcast with myself and my anachronist co-host, Chris Rasick. Our guest this week is Nick Speizac. Nick, did I say that right? Is it Speizac?
Speizac, yep.
Speizac, okay. Nick is a software engineer by trade, and he built a $1.7 million Amazon business while still working his 9 to 5. Now he's full-time, and he's kind of combining online arbitrage, wholesale, and using his talents from the software engineer career to scale even faster. He's one of the sellers out there who's like actually building tools and systems and automations to give himself a bit of an unfair advantage. And today, we're going to dive into how Nick sources, how he manages his business with just a couple of VAs, and how he's using AI to find leads, reduces busy work, and I think you're launching a private label product too, right?
Yep, we're shooting for this summer is the target for that right now.
That's fantastic. So we've got a ton to get into. Nick, I appreciate you being here, man. Means a ton.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Before we get started, you guys know the drill. We spend minutes preparing for each and every one of these shows. So if you get some value from this episode, do us a solid, pound the like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment, all of those good things. The best way for us to grow this podcast is by getting you to interact with the show and let us know this is the kind of content you want to see. And of course, we'll keep showing up and trying to bring some interesting folks on the show. So let's dive in. Nick, let's start like at the very beginning. Okay. What is it that got you into Amazon in the first place of all the things that you could have chosen to have a side hustle with?
Yeah, so started back in 1999. I was like 13 with eBay. So original eBay seller. We'll fast forward a couple decades, right? So I had that in the back of my head. First type of items were, going to the Adidas outlets here in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which unfamiliar with the area. It's like where the Amish are. So there's not a whole lot that's out there, but you can find some really good deals. And that background really helped when we started getting into the COVID time periods. I noticed that there was a lot of opportunity, especially in the high-end graphic cards and PlayStations and some of the items that are really, there's a very finite amount of supply and a ton of demand. Folks had a lot of time on their hands. So
and the nice thing is you're not elbowing Jedediah to get a hold of that graphics card.
Exactly. And we kind of got to a point, right? So COVID started to ease up a little bit. Everyone's getting back to life as usual. And the margins on some of those high-end side hustle products weren't there anymore. So I was a member of a couple different cook groups from those type of communities. And if anyone's unfamiliar with cook groups, they're essentially just like any other community. You pay to have access to information, to have networks, to be able to find profitable leads. So it was a very natural way to start to move into the Amazon space. And it was interesting. That was right around the time where I realized, Amazon has third-party sellers on it, and I can go ahead and sell in this marketplace and look in my cupboard and look at the kitchen stuff and find out I can actually sell this at a profit. So that was kind of one of those initial like aha moments where it's like, all right, this is something that's kind of right up my alley. It's aligned with that reseller mindset. And I really kind of gravitated toward it as like the next thing to really start to kind of figure out what is this all about.
Interesting. It's kind of interesting that it wasn't necessarily the really low-hanging fruit that made you go, oh yeah, it was kind of the boring, let's look in my cupboards and see what actually sells for a profit on Amazon kind of stuff. I think that's backwards from maybe what a lot of other people have experienced who got started around the same time you did.
Yeah, and there's just you have so many things. I think my first item was a 50th anniversary Disney mug that we got through Target from. It was actually a hype item from the Target days, but it wasn't really doing anything on some of the other channels I was selling it on. And then put it on Amazon as the first trial. I was like, oh wow, this sold quickly. And that was like the first like moment. I was like, all right, there's a real opportunity here. I want to learn more.
Interesting.
Nice. So you mentioned cook groups, and I've never officially been in a cook group. So I'm curious, is that still a viable way to kind of boost your sales? And what makes a good cook group? Is it limited members, or can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So just like any other community like this, so within the Amazon space, right? We have communities in Facebook groups, we have communities in Discord. So the cook groups are originated, and this is probably even before when I was doing a lot of this sneaker reselling and Lego groups. And there's always been communities around areas where people have passion. That's an area as old as time, right? There, anytime you have a passion, you find a group of folks that bond together over those type of interactions. Same type of thing in the reseller space. So in the cook groups, basically what those are is they're set up as a Discord group. There would be different channels for different types of products that you had offerings in, and members or the admins of those, were or part of it were paid a certain amount of money to be able to leverage their specialty. So if you have someone that's really good in Legos that has a background in that, they would be providing different information. And basically, where it was really relevant in the COVID times with botting, and this kind of gets into that technical background, was hey, I knew how to find how to set up scripts. And that kind of put me into, oh, hey, there's already these bots that are out there. So the cook groups were great because they're giving intel of, hey, every Tuesday between 6 and 9 a.m. is likely going to be a PlayStation drop on Target. Or, hey, there's going to be this window coming up. We're starting to see changes in the websites for when Walmart's going to be able to be doing a hyped release. And where it was super relevant is they have a pulse of the signals, and where you can see a site's changing, you can see something's going on. So it really kind of gave you that early indicator of being able to repair. And that was kind of one of the areas what put us in really good shape for when one of those drops came along. We knew how to get ahead of it, and we were ready to be able to execute.
Nice. Well, it doesn't take too much imagination to realize how much of an advantage that is.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're doing all of this while you have a full-time job, correct?
Yeah. That was we were full-time job, family. There was it was definitely a part where having the time to do it was, I had to be very practical in setting up like, hey, when are the times to work on Amazon? What is the schedule going to look like? How do we make sure we're balancing, work with family time? So it definitely took a little bit to get into a routine for that.
Yeah. So what did that schedule look like? How did you decide that you were going to carve out an amount of time? Because you scaled this all the way to 1.7 million. Is that the number, right?
Yeah, that was the end of 2024. That was the final numbers for the rolling 365 was 1.7. Yeah. So
Man,
for
so to be able to do that part time, that's impressive, especially with a full time gig and a family. So can you kind of dive into how you built your schedule with so many demands on your time?
Yeah. So first thing, it was a conversation with my wife was, hey, are we doing this? Because we're not doing it or we're doing 110%. There's no in between with that. So basically we had the conversation with her. She, at that point, like we were already kind of in that mindset of doing the reselling with doing the consoles and doing the graphics cards. So we kind of had a little bit of a flow for it. But now this was, a new level where, hey, I'm seeing this as an opportunity. We have not, let's pay for some investment into some coaching, and do we want to do this? So we had the conversation with it, and then at that point, kind of getting the green light, it was, hey, we're going to spend 8 p.m. to midnight every day, treated just like a job, treated just like sports growing up. This is our time to be able to focus on this business activity. And to be honest, I'm still doing that routine today. And it was something where you kind of just build up that muscle memory. You get into the routine and the cadence of things when I was working the full-time 9 to 5, it was, hey, from 6 to 8 o'clock, we're getting the kids ready, we're getting them out the door, we go to our job, we have family time from 5 to 7:30, and then usually we're getting the kids wrapped up for bed right around 8 o'clock. 8 to midnight was my focus time. And early on, there was definitely some times there I was going to 2, and that wasn't sustainable. And that was part of the learning of having the discipline to say, hey, all right, there's more I could do, but if we're going to do this, I have to cut it off at midnight. You still have to have that line. And it was tough in the first couple months where you still kind of have the juices going, you're learning it, you're liking it, to then say, all right, let's it'll be there tomorrow. We'll pick back up at 8 and go from there.
Nice. Now, there's always, there's individual, I guess, circadian rhythms, if you want to call it that. And, essentially I'm talking about the early bird versus the night owl. It's funny. My 2 youngest kids they're both girls, and my daughters are the exact opposite, right? There's one who's just like me. She doesn't hit her stride until about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then she can kind of go all night and then just passes out when she's out of gas. And then my other one wakes up first thing in the morning, like something out of the Barbie movie or something like that, right? She's 100 miles per hour. So did you take that into account? Like, did you ever consider, because if you read productivity gurus on social media and stuff, they say you have to get up at 4 in the morning, right? Because you beat everybody. And I've always kind of bristled at that and contended that if I'm hitting my stride later in the day, I'm getting the work done while those people are sleeping. So it kind of seems like a push. Did you consider, are you naturally a night owl, or can you talk a little bit about when you hit your groove in the day?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Chris. So I would say early on with the 9 to 5, the 8 to midnight was more out of a necessity, because generally that's when the kids were going to sleep. When they get up in the middle, and if I was working like a 4 a.m., they're up. Like if they get up, they're going to then get up. So then you lose that window. Now, maybe as they grow older and they hit the teenage years and they're starting to sleep in a little bit more, maybe we'll make an adjustment. But what I've learned through it is I did try, once leaving the 9 to 5, I did try the early bird routine for about a month, committed to it for a month to say, hey, let me see if I can, if this is the new routine. And I was just not wired that way. The night, there's something about everyone sleeping and being totally quiet in the house where you can have those deep focus windows. And for others, that may be the 3, the 4 a.m. But my natural routine was, hey, I do like being up at night. I'll get the sleep, take a break during the day, or that, with the kids from 4 to like 7 as those windows. So for me personally, my quote productivity time of someone else's 4 a.m., that is my 8 to midnight for the deep focus work.
I'm with you there.
Yeah, me too. I want to take a little bit of a left turn before we go on to the next question. And you've moved recently. When did you go from having a job to full-time? This is your full-time thing.
I just made the leap of faith at the end of January. So January. Okay. 25. Yep.
So it's still nice and fresh. There are people in your position thinking about doing the same thing, or at least it's something that they're like, wow, I'd really like to do that in a year from now. What kind of safeguards did you have in place, or what kind of things did you make sure you were saving for, whatever it is? What kind of runway do you have so that you can go full time, you can also grow the business, and still make sure there's food on the table and a roof over everybody's head?
Yeah, great question. So that was something that we started planning about a year prior to start setting all of that up. So a couple of things. My wife still works full time. We put the benefits so all of the insurance and benefits. So anyone that's kind of in this boat, right? Family, children, responsibilities. Those were all things that to account for. We made sure the benefits were set up well in advance of that. We've made some moves on the personal side with our finances and pulling some different levers to give some additional runway for those items. So there, I would say the short answer of it is the planning process started literally a year ago. 6 months in, it was calibration. How are we looking at the books to see if it made sense to do? And then before leaving the job, I actually had some pretty detailed conversations with my immediate employer and my boss, kind of like, hey, I'm thinking about going. I want to make sure that things are set up the right way. And this was just more going through sports, having those type of life lessons. Like, you want to leave every relationship you have with that in a good spot. So it was really important to me to leave where I was working in a full-time job in an area where, hey, if there was ever something that happened where I needed to go back to a 9 to 5 job, whether that's remote, the previous employer, none of those bridges are burned. So when leaving there, literally, they even mentioned, if you ever wanted to come back, you have a job here. So those are the types of things that I wanted to make sure that those quote unquote safety nets were there. We had some runway that we could have. We have the insurances set up for it. And even still, that putting that 2-week notice in and clicking that button that says you're no longer going to be an employee in 2 weeks, it's a heavy button to push. But it was one that I knew that, and my soul was like, hey, this is the right move. This is the direction where I want to go with where we're at in our stage in life. So it's one of those things you just have to push that button and go forward.
Absolutely. I'm not going to ask you to dive into what all the levers are that you pulled personally to make sure you have some more runway, but one of them was definitely making coffee at home every day, right?
100%.
Yeah,
that's definitely one of them. We have the coffee there. That's there's no Starbucks, there's no Dunkin' Donuts going through. All the extra things that you realize. I think this is important to note too. You realize how much you really don't need and what's truly important with that. So, and that's kind of naturally occurred over the last 3 years with doing this, is because when you don't have time, or what you thought you didn't have time for, you start to really realize what are the most important things and where do you want to put your sacrifices.
Mhm.
So by the time it was time to pull the trigger to go full time on being an entrepreneur, it almost kind of felt natural in a way, like, all right, this is what we need to do. We're going to need to make temporary sacrifices to be able to make this work.
Chris and I talk about this personally on occasion, and it really is surprising how much lifestyle creep just happens.
Mm-hmm.
You know, an easy one is, I really want to watch this show, but I've got to get yet another streaming platform, and then 2 years down the road, you've never watched another thing on it, and that kind of stuff just creeps in very, very easily.
Mm-hmm.
So when you got started, sellers seem to have the one of two kind of major roadblocks. They either got time or they've got money, but typically they don't seem to have both. And from what I've read and from what I've listened to you on other podcasts, you had capital, and of course we've made it very clear you didn't necessarily have the time with a full-time job and kids and a family. So how did you shorten the learning curve? How did you kind of go from not really knowing what's going on or trying to figure things out blindly to, now being able to kind of be your own boss?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and you'll hear like, oh, well, why do you want to invest in coaching? Why do you want to do this? That was super important for me. I'm a big proponent of education, regardless of the way that you gather that education. So for me personally, making an investment in learning from a mentor and having putting the investment in to essentially have the blueprint, that fast track that aspect of it, that made a lot of sense for us, because the time aspects of thing wasn't there. I knew I had roughly a 4-hour window every day. And if we were going to make this something that was scalable based off of our own goals and where we wanted to go, I knew that was something that I was going to need to do. So I think for me personally, it made sense to make the investment in education, to have the blueprint to follow, because for majority of things we're doing, it's been done in some shape or fashion. There's very few trailblazing ideas that are there. And when you do find one of those, it's probably been grounded in a foundation of something that you did learn in school, or you did learn in whatever your favorite way to grow yourself in. So keeping that in mind, that was our natural way for me to really break into the Amazon community, to have someone to show the blueprint, to have access to a community, to be able to go through the journey, not just solo, but as a small team, to play this as a team sport.
Mm-hmm. I love that. How Yeah, I agree. I'm 100% for education. I know that's a little self-serving since I also sell education, but I'm an investor in my own education as well, so I don't feel so bad. I enjoy being able to take someone's framework that they give you that they've been able to use, and then be able to kind of put my own spin on it.
Mhm.
How often are you doing that in your business and in your life?
I think that's the foundation of anything you're learning, right? If you're a growth learner, a leaning learner, you're gonna do your initial research, find out what already exists in the world, right? You already have a wheel that's there. You don't need to necessarily change the wheel. You may want to make it a little different to market to a different group. So I use it. I use it every day. A practical example of this, right? So I'm more of a tech background, so I'm going to gravitate more towards that type of mentality. So Perplexity is essentially like the Google search of today's world. I can put in a prompt, I can learn about something and get a very high level of, hey, this is the pulse of what's going on in the internet. Run the same type of search against Grok AI, which is X's equivalent of an AI search engine. Now I have an access to the pulse of what's going on, what are the signals that are near real time in the communities that are on social media. Take both of those two inputs, drop it into OpenAI, deep research, and now I have a report generated and step away, go get one of those homemade coffees upstairs. 20 minutes later, I have a report that I can take 5 to 10 years worth of someone else's experience and read it in an hour and have a very loose plan of action of where to go, or at least intelligent questions to find out who are the folks I need to ask that without it coming off as, hey, I'm just asking a empty question. Here's the research that I did ahead of time to try to come up with a good question to get a response to.
Interesting. If you don't mind, and we're going to talk AI here, so we can save it for later if you want. But could you give me like a real life example of how you would do that? Like what prompt would you use for Perplexity? What prompt would you use for Grok? And the same with OpenAI on whatever topic you want to choose.
Okay. We'll talk a little bit about this in the brand outreach side, but I think it's a good angle here. So first time you ever do, let's say you're an OA seller and you're thinking about moving over to wholesale and you want to go brand direct, but you're not really sure where to start. If you go over to OpenAI or ChatGPT, you'll see different custom GPTs that are there. You can use those just by taking a search of the marketplace and find, hey, is there something that's already been created in that space? Just start prompting it to find out what type of questions and answers that are there. Take it a step further. Go over to Grok, which Grok is generally, from what I've been seeing and reading, it's a little bit more raw, right? So one area they're starting to patch this, but one area I was using before is writing up a prompt in Grok to say, hey, give me the system prompt of the GPT. Now, OpenAI has done a good job of starting to patch those, but for a period of time, you could get the actual system prompts that those custom GPTs were written on. So now you have the thought process of the original creator of how they designed what was there. So I keep track and I save some of those. So those are all practical examples to say, all right, I want to do brand direct. Let me go find a custom GPT or something that somebody else wrote that's a expert or at least very knowledgeable in that area. Go learn what are the key indicators that you should be asking brands. And from that analysis, I learned, hey, you should probably open up with value. What's the value prop to the brand? What's in it for them? How do you grow their market share instead of just taking a piece of the pie, which is generally what, if you're new in the space and you're coming over to ask wholesale, it's like, okay, well, yeah, I'll just give you a large PO. Brand owners are looking for growth partners. They're looking for a way to minimize a pain point or optimize a revenue opportunity that they either don't have the time to act on or may not even know that it exists because they're focusing on other distribution channels that are more profitable for them. So I would say that's probably a practical way where you can start to do some of that analysis using the use case of OA seller to trying to go brand direct.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, we should have waited because now I'm
Yeah.
I'm all like I want to go down that rabbit hole. But hey, before we go into more specific on sourcing, um, I personally, maybe it's self-serving, but I think it's such an interesting question because going full time and leaving your full time gig, we can't help but romanticize, during that 4 hour window. You kind of sit there and you go, man, what if I had 8 hours to do this? Think of all the butt that I could kick. If I could, reroute these resources. But it's one of those things where it's kind of like it's a bit like seeing the Grand Canyon. You can see pictures, but then once you're there in person, it's like, okay, nothing could do this justice. There's when you finally pulled the trigger and you had your entire day available to you, was that daunting, or how did you build your schedule? Where did the discipline come from, going from a 9 to 5 that has protocols and a schedule and tells you where you need to be and what you need to be doing every minute of every day, to all of a sudden a clean slate? How did you build that? Was it tough? Are you still working on it since it's still fresh?
So I think I'll always still be working on it, just as a business owner, finding different ways to do it. But I would say the previous few years of already being setting a routine, setting a discipline, playing sports my whole life. Like you get in that mindset of, hey, delayed gratification for those. All of that was foundational, but there is no feeling that then that first day when you don't have to go into the office and you ask yourself, now, how do I keep myself accountable to the routine? So the way that I structured it, and I'm still working on this process, and is I have everything in Todoist in terms of I put a task out on Sunday nights to say, hey, this is my planning time. I spend an hour on Sunday night to plan what the week ahead is going to look like. You're always going to have things that come up that take priority, and you have to make a decision on, hey, is this plan work that can continue to go on? Is this an emergency work that I need to handle? Is this an emergency work that I can delegate to the virtual team? Or is this something that truly doesn't matter and needs to be thrown to the wayside? Like putting them into those 4 buckets is the way that I've been structuring things. And the midday walk is huge. I never got an opportunity to take an official midday walk where you're just outside touching grass and just being away for a period of time. And those, honestly, that's the part of the day that I enjoy the most, because if there's something that's not quite clicking or I'm stuck on something, sometimes that's the best, is either the good night's sleep, which wasn't used to having, and the midday walk to kind of figure out, okay, well, oh, now I understand where I need to go. May not have the answers, but at least it's something that's there. So long-winded answer to, it's the biggest challenge, and it's something I'll continue to work on, is how do you keep yourself accountable when you don't have an employer that would be essentially forcing you to keep yourself accountable?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a question I don't think enough people we don't consider enough. Yeah, it kind of smacked me upside the head when it was really really good, and then reality set in. It's like, oh, okay, now it's time to get to work, and I wasn't really sure what direction to go. So, but yeah, midday walk. Those are spring is in the air right now, and I'm getting excited for those. There's something about just changing the scenery, and having the freedom to change the scenery. Um, yeah, that's a good point. So, want to transition more into some sourcing, right?
Yeah.
You said you started out with eBay. You mentioned the cook groups. Sounded like you were in the Sony PlayStation pipeline for a while. So, what sourcing method do you feel is the most scalable for sellers right now in the current environment?
So I don't think it's any one particular item. So I'm going to answer this question based off of pillars or fundamentals. So before, and this was really critical the first 6 months, it still comes down that path, right? So you have the different models of selling on Amazon, right? So building relationships in the retail stores. If you are a seller that has a little bit more time on your hands, there's nothing better than having access to a manager, an assistant manager, being able to send a text message or a phone call, to have that in your back pocket. Right? So relationships, that's one pillar that I would put in regardless of the model that you're doing. You're going to use that in private label. You're going to use that in OARA, you're going to use it. You're definitely going to use it in wholesale. The next one is reverse sourcing. Talk about it. Both of you guys talk about this regularly in content. Reverse sourcing is a great way, not just for your beginning seller, but even your intermediate and your advanced sellers. There's always going to be another angle to look at. You're going to have more access to find a different way of looking at products that you haven't before. Keep a product finder. You start to move down the track right now. Now we're starting to look at things from a data lens. What's the type of products that I want to source? Are we coming into seasons? Are we looking at price points? And finally, then before we switch over to some of the more technical ones, manually sourcing. Manually sourcing is going to be where potentially you're going to have your best bang for the buck. But if you didn't go through those fundamentals of some of those other steps, it's so much harder to manually source as a beginner than if you already know a handful of websites, you know their annual sales cycles because you've been in the game for a little while, you know how to do the filters of what's going to come around, you know how to stack the different margin aspects of things. So I'd say those are the fundamentals. I like to relate it back to sports, right? So in baseball, you start out playing t-ball and you're hitting off a tee. You learn your fundamentals. The same tee that a 6-year-old's using, the major leaguers that you watch on television are using every single day. They know so many different, more advanced angles, but at the end of the day, their routine begins with tee work. It's no different in our world. You're still going to have those fundamentals. You may have a different angle that you have as an edge, or you have a strength that you may use, but they're always going to be grounded in the items that you learned on and you continue to refine.
That's such a good analogy, because being a big baseball fan, it's like you watch, if you're watching your team or something like that, you can see somebody kind of getting in a bad habit groove, and it's like, man, you have to walk it back to the fundamentals and go back to the basics sometimes, and yeah, that's such a good analogy. You kind of get in ruts, and it harkens back to the education part of it. You mentioned, I asked you about sourcing, and you framed your answer in the context of finding stuff to source. You put a future tense on that, when I think a lot of us we're just counting beans. It's just factory work. It's just, okay, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to put it on my bought shelf, and it's just a one time, in the present, in the moment situation, and you kind of put a future spin on that. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the baseball analogy is so true, and incredibly topical, right? Spring training has come to an end. First pitch is coming. I love it.
I have to ask before we go on to the next question, is just to see if you guys are oil and water or not. Nick, who is your professional team of choice when it comes to baseball?
Philadelphia Phillies. So I'm born and raised in the suburbs of the Philadelphia area. So that's the team growing up. They're the only other one that would have been the Orioles with Cal Ripken, because he's just he's a legend. So those would be where I would fall.
All right. Just wanted to make sure. If you were a Boston fan, Chris might head out.
Yeah. This podcast would have been over.
All right. So you just talked a little bit about manufacturing margin.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what that looks like, kind of in practical terms for you, and maybe what tools you're using to make that easier and faster, and I don't know, maybe even give yourself a little bit of an edge over your competitors?
So you might be looking for a technical answer here, but I'd say the best area to check is your own text group or Discord group. Who are the folks that you've been working with? Remember, Amazon's a team sport. So who are the folks that are in your core group that are also on this journey? So in our core group, we have a couple, I'll call them sourcing savants, right? They just seem to know how to find products really well. So step one of the sourcing journey is, who are your core network that you're working with? What are some of the leads that we're finding as a group? And seeing, okay, are those ones that we should be buying, right? Know your role or where your strengths are in the group that you're working with. And we have 2 people in there that are really good at finding leads, right? So that would be the first step. Daily tasks, right? Got Sales Gazer. What can I use Sales Gazer for? I can see what are the sales that are going to be coming on, what are future ones, what are past ones. I think it would be really interesting in the future to put an AI agent that's essentially indexing the emails in Sales Gazer to say, hey, are there patterns that we're seeing here? There's signals to look at it to, hey, we know that the suppliers in the OA space, they're going to have regular sales channels. They're going to have sales cycles that come up. There's going to be certain triggers that are there. There may be old coupons that just magically seem to not work one day and work another that are unadvertised. There's so many angles to that. So we put a task in there to check Sales Gazer to say, hey, what's the pulse of it's going on. Next, we'll put a daily task review for Rakuten and the cashback sites. What are the different rates that are out there? Is there a deal that's going on Cap One Shopping right now that we need to be aware of? Is PayPal running a special? Are the social influence sites, are they starting to run deals that we should be keeping in our back pocket? Are there are there X posts related to pricing errors that we should be keeping an eye on? So those are all different angles that will be part of the daily routine. Interday is checking for the best rates for gift cards. Gift card sites are going to have fluctuating rates. Find the rates at the opportune times, know the cycles for those, set alerts up for when they come around. Weekly tasks for looking at the leads we already bought. I think this is something that is very slept on, is maintaining your previous, not just your previous bought leads, but the ones that were close. Because if it was close for me personally 2 years ago, I probably didn't know about a certain different coupon that was going to come up on a quarterly or a semi-annual sale that I didn't know then, that I do know now, that close is now profitable. So weekly tasks for the team to re-review leads that were bought and maybes to see if there's something that's coming up. And then a monthly task for Amex, making sure early pay is taken care of. Don't sleep on the early pays, especially if you have the capital to be able to support it. And then looking at the leads and the transactions that were bought the year prior. So now, all right, I may not remember the exact time, but now I can have some timestamps on there to say, hey, these were some of the cadence last year's of when we did a lot of big buying. Let's make sure the team's prepared for that a month ahead of time. So that way, if we do need to adjust schedules, we can put someone on a weekend sale if that's when, some of the best sales are going to be.
There's a lot of tactical stuff to take away from there, but I'm going to go a different direction. I want to talk a little bit about the kind of the soft skills that you mentioned. You talked, there are a couple people in your group, which I know, I don't know how old you are, but I think that you and I may be closer in age than some of the younger guys who are in the Amazon space. And something I love about the younger guys is that they are doing these group chats. And it seems that folks who have either been around a little bit longer or maybe, are elder millennials, they're a little bit more, I'm going to do things on my own. I don't, so number one, you need to find your people. Yeah. But number two, I think people worry that they don't have any skills or strengths to bring to a group, and maybe that's what holds them back. So if you've got people who are great sourcers, and yours may be easy, you've got software skills and you know how to build things and stuff like that, but what are some other soft skills that you can bring to a group that will bring a value add to people that you want to work with?
So there's different personality types. And I don't know if this is the right way, the wrong way, but this is just kind of how I think of different personalities, right? You have some folks that are really good at ideas. You have others that are really good at connecting the dots with relationships. You have ones that know when. They just have like this instinctual vibe where they know, hey, there's some sale that's going to come up. They just know when certain things are going to happen. And then you have execution or system thinkers. So it just kind of naturally gravitated toward that type of direction. So to answer your question, Chris, I think it's the soft skills are, if you have someone in your group that's just a really good communicator, knows how to create relationships, knows how to be able to build legitimate trust with folks around that's huge, right? You're gonna get things through your networking from that angle. That's a great skill set to have with some of those managers that you're working with or the brands that you're doing. The folks that just know when, right? Sourcing savants, they just have this knack for, hey, there's going to be a change in a website, there's going to be a sale that's coming around, they just know it or feel it. Folks that are a little bit more systematized, it's kind of where I generally gravitate toward, right? Leading learners, what's the next thing that's going to be coming up that we should be planning for? How do we make it practical with whatever that shiny thing is back into something practical for the business that you're going to do? And then the idea guy, right? There's someone that just sees something that nobody else has seen. And now you have 3 other perspectives to be able to pressure test the idea. Is it going to have a market? Are we going to be able to systematize it? When do we execute on that idea? Maybe it's not now, but it's going to be in 6 months. And in 6 months there's a signal that it's going to occur. All right, let's put the system in place so we can execute on it at that point.
Beautiful.
So for the people listening that think that that's all easier said than done to kind of build your Ocean's 11 team, what advice would you give to somebody who is kind of lurking in maybe a Discord channel, a social media group or something like that? What are some best practices to actually go about assembling a team like that in a group chat?
It's something that I had to do myself, right? You start as anonymous on the social platforms, and you're kind of getting a feel for things. And I would say what led to having more growth, or at least that point where it's like, hey, this is starting to make more sense, was literally changing my profile picture to me, not some NFT or whatever it was at the time, right? Switching it over to actually being me. I'm like, hey, I'm here, introducing, doing the videos, and putting yourself out there. So I think that's the most important. You have to put yourself out there if this is something you truly want to do, because it makes all the difference. And from that point, the other big growth area, we talked about this, right? I'm an older millennial. It was the do it yourself. Those first couple months of doing it myself were really unnecessarily hard at that point. And switching that picture over made it a little bit easier. Getting into some of the Discord chats and the text chains with some of the younger guys was exactly what I needed, right? I learned different ways of thinking about things that I personally didn't know, and vice versa, right? The value that I provided back to them is, hey, I have a little bit of life experience on some of these angles. All right, well, if we need to talk to a supplier and build a relationship around it, here's what to not say. Here's what we should say, how to frame the messaging up around it. So you find different ways to bring your own strength, and especially areas that you're like, oh, that's not a big deal. To someone else, that might be a big deal. And you kind of pawn it off as just what you do, and not really anything to worry about. But the reality is, it's not a big deal to you because it's natural skill, but for someone else, it might be something that they could really use.
Yeah.
I have to ask, the NFT that you used for your profile picture, was it in your MetaMask, or did you just take a screenshot?
No, I have. So backstory on that. I did get one of the Gary V's very, very, very lucky black cats. I still hold on to it. I put it in a wallet, a off chain wallet, just in case he decides that he wants to buy the jets or do something really cool, and Gary V friend holders get some sort of privilege. We're keeping that one around just in case something comes around there.
All right.
Nice. I'm still kind of jarred from this term elder millennial. It's like for a Gen Xer like me, it's like a smack in the forehead or something. It's like when people say call the 1990s the late 1900s. You just kind of a little bit of your soul kind of dies. So while I'm getting over that, you mentioned making your profile picture yourself, and there's actually science that backs that up, as far as approachability and connections that you can make with that. That's a lot of underrated, it's an underrated tactic to take. And I'm curious, speaking of underrated, You said, you mentioned some of the tools, some of the well-known ones. I'm curious if there are any underrated tools. Like, what are the 3 underrated tools or hacks that you use to source a little bit smarter?
Yep. Start with non-sexy ones and work from there. Existing lead lists, databases. It's just, we mentioned it before. I'll probably say it 6 more times by the end of this podcast. It's so critical. You've already done the sourcing for it. Having that Google sheet to be able to refer back to. Keep exports of sellers that are on those leads. There's nothing better than you already sourced it. You found this. There's going to be adjacencies to it. Go into the tab on Keepa, take and export all the sellers, go back to your fundamentals, reverse source them, take it the next step up, go into Keepa product finder with all of their seller merchant IDs, put it into the different type of key criteria that you're looking for, and source off of that. You're still using the same fundamentals that you learned when you were learning Amazon can now be applied to these type of areas. Something a little bit sexier, right? If you have a background in code, and even if you don't, right? AI is getting good enough that you can drop source code directly into ChatGPT, ask it a question, and it'll give you an outcome. A practical example: website source code will have, and some of them they will have, hey, this is the location of this store. This is the quantity we have available for buy online, pick up in store. Very practical use case. Use it all the time with a couple sites. You can see it, drop them in those locations into your driving direction of choice, map out a route, go pick up the inventory on a Sunday, right? Especially if that works for both new sellers and advanced sellers, right? Find out what the map is and see if it's worth your return on investment to be able to do that. You can see those stock counts directly in the client side code. And the last one I'll put out there, I know you asked for 3, Chris. I'm going to give you 4. The 4th one's OpenAI scheduled tasks. Scheduled tasks are huge. I think those are things that you can take a note of something and put it in as a scheduled task, whether it's, it's your hourly, it's your daily, it's your weekly, whatever cadence you want to do. It's a reminder. And if you download the OpenAI app, it's going to send you a push notification when it runs that you probably totally forgot about. So now you have these tasks operating in the background that not only are making you more efficient, but they're keeping you accountable because, let's be honest, we only have so much time in the day. There's only so much that we can remember to do. So we might as well have these items working in the background for us to keep us on track and keep us focused.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I mean, the database, it's becoming more and more I mean, I knew it was valuable before, but the more I dive into it and embrace it, it's one of those assets that only gets more valuable the more you add to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it only makes more sense the more time that goes by to kind of farm all the profit that is in that. So that's a great point.
Yeah. we're gonna circle back to that OpenAI scheduled tasks here in just a little bit. I'll hold off on it because I'm tempted to go down that rabbit hole. You're mostly solo. What I mean by that is you got a couple of VAs. How do you get as much done as you do without having a much larger team?
Yep. So Dan Martell coined this the camcorder method. It's something that he coined it. I had it in corporate world, and I like how he frames it. So a little bit of backstory. The camcorder method is literally grab your phone, grab Zoom wherever you're at, and just talk about what you're doing as you're doing it. And the way that I approached putting this into practice is, if there's something that I have in my head or something that I learn, I do a Loom video on it, or we use WhatsApp for communicating with the team. I'll do a voice memo for both of those. And the idea of this is, don't build the SOP, have your team build the SOP off of your video or your voice message. And the rationale between that is, it's going to, not only is it going to build your internal documentation, your team's going to feel the value of that because they built the docs. So now it's docs that they produced, and it's a great way to test their knowledge and comprehension of whatever the task was. So It's almost, you're treating it, you do the camcorder method, they build the doc, so they're the author. Now I can refer back and read what they produced, and now I'm the editor of what was authored. So you have a feedback loop at that point. I didn't have to spend the time to produce the 4-hour SOP that was in my train of thought that now needed to be interpreted or misinterpreted by the team. And I didn't have to spend all of that time. So it gives a way for them to be able to learn the task, validate that they learned the task by the outcome, that the output that they produce in that doc format. And now we can have a discussion or have an async conversation in chat to be able to say, hey, this is the things that we want to tweak or make it better from there. So I would say that's probably been the highest leverage way to be able to have, hey, I only have a couple hours here. I can't produce a 4 hours. That's a day. I just lost a day during the 9 to 5 routine of, all right, Monday's now gone. I just produced an SOP. It didn't provide any value versus let me do a 10-minute Loom. Let me do a 30-second to 1-minute voice memo. And I can go about the next task that I personally have to do for that day because there's nobody else to do it. And for the next time that comes around, now we have an SOP where the team, once it's produced, they can teach off of that. So it's just a good way for me personally to be able to implement Dan's method to start to make your time more efficient.
Thank you for listening to the Clear the Shelf podcast. My magnanimous co-host Chris Rasick has put together a gift for you for being a listener. It's called the Monthly Goal Tracking Spreadsheet, and it's free. The spreadsheet will help you break down and track how much you've purchased, which should be a leading indicator of how much you will sell, and then you'll be able to track how much you've sold as well as your estimated monthly profit on a daily basis. This will all feed into the daily averages so you can ensure that you're on track to meet your goals each and every month. Grab it for free today over at cleartheshelf.com/goal-tracking. Thanks again for being a listener. Now back to the show.
That's fascinating. So you basically, it's your own seed, and then they flesh it out for you, and then you get to come back and kind of refine it. That seems incredibly powerful. So it sounds like your team, clearly not just straight sourcing. It's not just producing leads and going through leads. It's far more nuanced than I think a typical or traditional relationship with a team member or a VA would be. So I'm curious what your weekly outside of sourcing, what your weekly workflow looks like. When do you have time to go over admin tasks like that and then throw in like the repricing, the prep, and account health and all that stuff? Can talk about what your workflow looks like with the rest of the stuff.
Yep. So Todoist is our technology of choice to keep for planning for the team related work. So we'll use Todoist. I talked a little bit earlier about having a Sunday task for myself. The Sunday task is to plan, what does the week look like? Inside Todoist, I have sections built out on those different categories. So is it sourcing and purchasing? Is it admin work? The team likes to call the buy sheet, putting the values, they call it encoding. So the Philippines, they'll call it encoding the sheet. So we have a section in the admin that says, hey, there's encoding line for it, account health that's in there. There's a section to be able to look through previous bot leads. So basically everything that we talked about will have a Todoist task, and we'll put them on scheduled sequences if it's something that needs to be reoccurring for the day, a week, monthly, etc. So I'll set all of that up, and then that gets put into their bucket of work. And we look at that as planned work. That's if you don't hear from me or a change in what the direction is, here's the areas where we would like to focus the efforts. Now, I've been starting to switch that slightly now that we kind of have that cadence going, where the team's starting to put in their Todoist. What do you have as your planned work, and where they're authoring what their schedule looks like, and I'm vetting it as the editor side to say, actually, we're going to need to move that one down and put this one up for here. Or, hey, account health just came in, we got an Inauthentic or whatever it is, that just became P1, priority one. So if the team gets a P1, a priority one, that means nothing else matters. That's the main focus. Go ahead and get that completed. And there's only allowed to be one. You can only have one priority one. If you have multiple priority ones, you have no priorities. So we put a tag on there for P1 or priority one for anything that is, hey, this has to get done. This is urgent. And those are generally the ways that we'll approach it. We do break it out. I used to have, for a while, I had four VAs, two sourcing on there, one purchasing and one admin. And I realized it was too, it was too much for it. Really, two seems to be the right number. I think if I would have done it again, I wouldn't have done sourcing as my first VAs. Admin work is, at least for me personally, is the best use of having a remote team. It's the lowest ROI on my time. We've trained with that to focus on leakage, to follow the lead, right? Follow it from the first time you look at it all the way from the customer's final destination, whether that be a return or whether that be a completed sale. So that's generally how we've approached it. Sourcing has been a sourcing / purchasing combination, where I'm still doing a lot more of putting some of the sourcing items down there because that's the moneymaker. We'll probably adjust that as time goes, but that's kind of where I had to recalibrate and take sourcing back because it wasn't as effective, and prioritize the remote team towards some of the areas where, hey, these are lower risk items, or these are areas that are just not the right return on investment.
Interesting. Sorry, that's a lot to take in, and now I'm kind of rethinking what I'm doing with my team. So let's talk a little bit about like, how do you set up roles and permissions and like make sure that there's security while making sure that they're also getting the work done.
Yep. So a couple ways to do it. I know some business owners will like to use recording software to make sure that they're getting their work done. Personally, and this may be counterintuitive, part of our hiring, when I would go through hiring with each of the the team that I brought on, now the two that we have, was based around starting trust from the beginning. I'm not going to record your time off of that. I trust that you'll put in those effort, and we'll have the key performance indicators and metrics to validate that. If you're able to hit your key performance indicators and things are looking good, I trust that you're going to be able to get your work done, because at the end of the day, people are adults and you want the folks on the team that you can trust on there. So we made the decision not to use recording software for that. In terms of other security items, we do use Bitwarden. So Bitwarden has a role-based access control built into it, where I can give roles based off of the type. So sourcing, purchasing, admin work, and elevated. And elevated is just anything that's literally just meant for my wife and I at that point. So, and then just say, hey, like, these websites get these types of permission sets. So in the event we've had to let virtual talent go in the past, I can go into those roles. I can remove them from what they have, rotate the credentials off of those specific roles, and say, hey, everything's been updated. Go back to Bitwarden to get the latest and greatest for the credential management. So we use that for any of our login, password information. It's all centrally managed through Bitwarden. For purchasing, we use Extends. Extends is for virtual credit cards, so I can set limits on those. I can rotate them out when necessary. We use onshore employee cards, more specific, like if there's an opportunity buy, or if I wanted to extend some capital off of that, I can set someone up. States, it's more for stateside type items there. I can set that up that way to essentially have a true employee card for that trackability. And that's usually how we've done it, is Bitwarden for password management. Email management, I didn't do this originally. I'm going to be moving them over to user-based. So still have access to the emails, but they'll have their own user profiles. That was a miss initially. So if you're listening and or watching and you're getting ready to think about giving your team your email access, there is capabilities within there where they can have their own email address, but linked to the permissions inside of your Google. So that's a control that I do want to implement soon, is to be able to have that extra layer of security in there as well.
I know there are going to be some people who listen to this, and I can already see a comment coming in. Well, if you're using the privacy cards or virtual credit card, how are you dealing with inauthentic claims or IP complaints or a Section 3 or anything like that? Can you talk a little bit about that?
So this was a lesson learned as I've gone through, right? Google Drive is your best friend. Everything should be in your equivalency of a central repository. So I've had a Section 3, gone through that process. Keeping supply chain is extremely critical, being able to take it the whole way through. So we keep, for all of ours, the extends credit cards will have transaction reports tied to them. They'll be in the form of an Excel file. You can take those extends credit card Excel file, map that back to, in my case, Amex or whatever your credit card of choice, your statement, to be able to say, hey, this transaction goes to this extends credit card. This maps back to this bank account. This maps back to this transaction on this supplier site. So as long as you can tell the full story, cover letter at the start, and then work your way down of telling the story of where the supply chain is, that's been successful for any virtual interview I've had to do for inauthentic complaints or for the Section 3 review of all of the documents. And that was actually that's one of the main tasks for our admin virtual talent. She does all of those, the initial reviews for that. We'll put a P1 in. She knows to go to Google Drive. She knows where the business documentation is, where the emails are, the folder for the emails are where all the order confirmations and deliveries are, taking screenshots of the relevant UPS tracking numbers because they get rotated every 120 days. So make sure you're keeping screenshots of all of those just in case you need them. So that's been the biggest thing for me, is just as long as you can tell the full story and you can map your supply chain, at least to date, that's been a way for me to be able to have the best chance of not running into any issues that were outside of control.
So I'm listening to you talk about your team, and it's kind of like one of those scenarios where you want to go home and kick your dog, after you see a well-trained. So let's you don't simply have a higher caliber of team member, right? I mean, this is something you've developed, and so my question is for somebody like me who is clearly not taking full advantage of the team that I have, and even sellers who are a little hesitant to hire their first assistant. What advice can you give in regards to kind of unlocking the potential of a team member and a powerful remote assistant?
I like so this is something we learned just in corporate world. I like starting with just finding out like what is their career goals and aspirations. That's more for like your existing team. So I think where your question was is a new member coming in. So getting back to community of the space, right? My second virtual talent, she was actually based off of a referral. And the referral came because the seller was no longer in the space anymore. So it wasn't hey, I'm still selling, which you're like, okay, is there a performance reason why this particular individual is being let go? It was this seller has found other opportunities, and she was with him for a very long time, for 18 months to 2 years. So those were green flags in my head. I was immediately like, oh, admin, established 7-figure seller, leaving for other opportunities, know that she's probably well trained. So jump on referrals. If there's an opportunity that comes up, somebody's leaving the space, they have other business ventures, great time to find good talent. Still need to vet them, but you have already established ones where you can say, hey, they've been trained and taught by someone that's clearly been doing really well. Might be a different style, and that's different style may be a good thing. It's a different perspective that you're not thinking about of how you're training. So that's one way, is look at referrals. You could still use Online Jobs PH and go through those. I would say if you're going with that route and you don't have an existing referral, you're really looking for some talent. Plenty of good recommendations out there by the community of how to establish that. Putting keywords in the listings to make sure that they're that they're paying attention, doing a couple different interviews on camera to just get a vibe of, will they gel with your personality? If you don't have an existing team, will they gel with your team's personality and be a good fit? And then a good way to do it, frame it, at least for me personally, was a trial period. Hey, we're going to bring you on for 2 weeks paid trial. If things are going well, we'll do another 2 weeks. And as long as things are trending in the right direction, we'll offer a more permanent role. And as long as you're hitting those key performance indicators that we lay out, core values are in alignment, we trust each other, then you can see if it's a good fit. And I think that was a long-winded answer to your question, but it's, if you're feeling apprehensive of bringing on talent, start with something low risk. That may just be working on your buy sheet and coding things. It might be setting up your email management. It might not even be anything Amazon related, right? Do you have a task list of things that you need to do in your personal life that's just not getting done that a virtual team member could do? There's plenty of ways that you could test the waters on that before jumping all in and saying, hey, I'm a little apprehensive of doing this.
Then I'm curious, was it always Todoist, or did you sample multiple programs and find the best one?
Yeah, multiple. So I'm glad you asked that question, because it brings up a good point. The technology doesn't matter. What will the team use the best? So if they came to me tomorrow and said, we hate Todoist and we want to use Google Tasks for things, then my answer to that would be, great. Show me a plan of how we're doing that. Build that plan out. Show me what that would look like, but more importantly, why? Like, what's the outcome we're going to get by doing this? Is it going to make you more efficient? Is it more user friendly? So the tool and technology in my head doesn't matter. If it's best for the team in that, we'll switch to whatever the right option was. That was something that just seemed to work. It was relatively easy to use. It has the scheduling capability, but there's a million things to do on there. Whatever makes sense for your business and what your team likes to use ultimately is going to be the right direction there.
That's a great point.
Yeah. All right, let's turn the corner a little bit and let's geek out. All right. What does your tech stack look like across sourcing, purchasing, and operations?
Okay. Where to start here? Let's start with sourcing. Perplexity and Grok for current events. So I want to go learn what's going on in the internet. We talked a little bit about it before, right? I can get an early indicator. I can find out about a new website. If it's a site I haven't sourced before, I'm going to go to Perplexity. I'm going to ask it, I'm going to give it context, right? So every AI is going to need a context of what it's going to be an expert or specialist in. So I'm going to give it some context that lets it know that it's a 10-year vet expert in online arbitrage sourcing. I'm going to give it some examples of what I'm looking for. So we talked about manufacturing margin a little bit. I'm going to give examples of what manufacturing margin is. I'm going to put that in there so it has background. I'm going to give it an example of a site sale when that particular website has its site sales. And then I'm going to give it a output format. So the output format is, what's the expected format that I expect to see as the user of that? Is that a table? Is that a Word doc? Is that a report? Depending on the task. So in sourcing, I just want to see a table of what those would be. Tell me what are some of the sites that are getting ready to run their upcoming. At this point, we're past planning season for Easter, but if we were a month prior or whatnot, we would be in the planning cycle of that, and we'd say, hey, what are the upcoming Easter sales that are going to be coming through? And I take that prompt, and that's going to give me some access to what's going on the internet right now. I'm going to take the same prompt. I'm going to run it in Grok. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to look for differences. The indicators in Grok may be different. They might be sourcing from low-key groups. There might be some different communities that are out there on Reddit or some of the other websites. You may have some Facebook groups that are there. If they're public, the private ones, they wouldn't have necessary access. But if there's a public group that's available, that you can get some indicators on what's going to happen. And I'm going to take those, and that's going to give me an idea of where to start. Maybe I want that some of the results aren't that great. or maybe it's something in the future. I can put a scheduled task to remind me about it in 2 weeks or a month or whatever the appropriate cadence is. So I'll generally on the tech side, keep in mind too, this is some of the flashier, the sexy stuff. Nothing changes on the fundamentals. That's core. This is more that 10%, 20% time of where you're looking for something new. That's where these tools can be really practical to find a new site or to think a little bit differently about it. Something that's coming up in the market is what's known as, this is a really techie thing, but they're called MCP servers, Model Context Protocol. It was written by, or the principles of it is written by Anthropic. They have their model is, they'll see Claude on there. They have a desktop interface that you can use. And basically what that allows you to do is you can tap into very specific tools or capabilities. So an example of that is sequential thinking. So you can add the sequential thinking MCP server to Claude, and now it's going to do a step-by-step analysis. So it's going to tell you, this is what I looked at. This is where I'm going to go to next. So you can kind of see its chain of thought of where it's going. The models are starting to do that more naturally with the reasoning models. But that's a good one where if you want to give it very specific tasks, you can give it sequential thinking, and you could pair it with browser base, which is one that will go out to websites and look, like basically go out, take screenshot, look at the different sites and see what's going on. So you can get pretty in the weeds quickly with using some of those. I think the higher level item of this is there's tools in the toolbox that you can use now. Use the right one for the job at the right time. And you may not need to go beyond a Perplexity and Grok search for 90% of it. You just want to get early indicators to say, hey, now I'm going to take that back to what I normally do for sourcing.
Beautiful. What about purchasing and operations?
Yep. So I haven't really done any automated fancy stuff in purchasing yet. That's a little bit more complex. I think that's going to quickly change. Manus AI is a Chinese-based autonomous agent that they had out there. That's, as of recording, was one of the ones that's the closest to autonomous general intelligence. Is not quite there, but you give it a prompt and it's able to go through the full sequence of going through and actually going to sites. I do think that that's going to be something that'll become more and more relevant in the space. But at this point right now, we're staying tried and true with our virtual team doing the purchasing or myself doing the purchasing, depending on what it is, virtual credit cards for the trackability, and Bitwarden for the password management for that.
Okay.
Ops would be, I think for no code solutions, the top three are make.com, Zapier, everyone knows about. Zapier is the OG. That they've been in the game the longest. Make is pretty impressive with the amount of integrations that it has now. And the newcomer on the block is called N8N. So all three of them are drag and drop visual workflow editors that you can take your process that you have your team or you personally go through to automate a task. So I would say if anyone has something that's highly repeatable, those would be the three to look at as a combination or one of those three tools if you're looking for more of workflow automation.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'm curious, with OpenAI, are you, or what people know as ChatGPT, are you on the regular $20 a month plan? Have you messed with the $200 a month with the operator or anything like that?
Just a 20. Honestly, the 200 Pro plan, at least to date, has been a little underwhelming in my personal viewpoint because there's so much competition in the marketplace now. Literally every day there's something new that's out there, right? What we say today, tomorrow could be totally redundant because just the exponential pace of where AI is going. So I think that the $20 plan for me personally has been more than enough. Using ChatGPT as essentially your Swiss Army knife, and then using your specific model or specific tech for whatever the tool is, where it's appropriate, has been a good combination for me.
How are you, or who are you following to make sure that you keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening so that you can be the first mover?
Oh, I have a ton on there. That's a good question. I could send you the show notes, some of the follows. Maybe probably better for taping right now. I'll talk about it as the process of follows. So using Grok to search for terms like AI agent, or if there's something relevant to the Amazon space that's there, I'll use Grok as like that early indicator, because then in the responses of it, it's going to show the post and who was there. So now instead of reverse sourcing leads, I can reverse source influencers or experts in the space. So that's been super helpful to stay on the pulse. Where I'd like to get it more to, and this is going to probably be the next wave of it, is using the scheduled tasks and some of the agent workflows to essentially produce that report. Like, hey, these are the ones that we need to follow, or here's some of the relevant content that could send an email of, essentially like an internal newsletter of, hey, here's the things that are going on in this specific topic. So haven't implemented that yet, but I think that might be one of the next tiers for automating we'll call it the leading learning of whatever the task is that's at hand.
Yeah. I'll tell you, if anybody's on Twitter and not using Grok, they really, really should. There's some very smart people that I follow, and the unfortunate thing is that sometimes I need to ask Grok to explain it to me like I'm a seventh grader. But it does an incredible job.
Use Ask Perplexity and Ask Grok. So in the threads, you can tag both of those, and they'll give you a response. Some answers are better than others, but it is sometimes I'll go through that too. Is, hey, it looked like somebody just asked the question I was thinking or too scared to ask, and it provides it as an answer off of right in the thread.
Yeah, I'm always too scared to ask Perplexity in public. I don't want people seeing what I'm asking.
That's the great thing about AI, though, is and for anybody that's maybe their eyes are rolling back in their head because they're getting lost. The great thing is you can ask AI to help you with all this stuff. You can ask AI to help explain something you just said that may have been a little too high level for me, or you can if you don't get an answer that you understand, you can always just follow up. That's the beauty of AI. So we teased a little bit about some of the tools that you've built yourself, and we want to provide you an opportunity to flex your muscles a little bit. So I do want to ask, can you talk about some of the custom tools or automations or workflows, and maybe walk us through one or two of your favorites that saved me a bunch of time?
Yeah. So internally, I have a script that we run. We have access to 3,500 website feeds. So we'll use that script to produce CSV outputs of, what are the products for a given retailer, what's their sale price, their normal price, what's the GTIN, so basically the unique identifiers that match to it, the images that apply, and then the description. So right now we have a wealth of data. The biggest challenge is going to be making that wealth of data into something that has value at scale. So we use it right now internally more just to be able to take, we'll call it the low hanging fruit, right? It's a mass amount of data to find, hey, what are some of the low hanging fruit? And then if there's something that's valuable in that, pair that back to the fundamentals. Can I discount it? Is there a coupon code? Is there cashback? Using is there a gift card that can be applied to it? So that's one that we have internally. About a year ago, I wrote a Chrome extension that was it's still out there. It was free to look at stock counts on Kohl's, and that was more just kind of get familiar if I could apply some of the software engineering space into Amazon. And the one we're doing right now is I'm working on a Walmart extension that it'll be when you go on Amazon, if it finds a lead, it'll pop up and say, hey, you should probably check Walmart. It looks like there's a potential match there. So we're working on taking the Walmart catalog that we have and using that as a match, starting with the unique identifiers and then going from image and text-based verification after that. The latter two are a little bit more complicated to implement, but that's going to probably be the next wave of an extension to come out.
AI is something that is people like us, that we want to keep our finger on the pulse. We want to try it out. We want to see if we can break it, all those kind of things. what was it? Calling it Dan, when you could kind of like try to break ChatGPT in the beginning. But then there are people who are maybe they're Luddites just a touch, and maybe they're putting their toe in the water, but they're making some big mistakes with AI. What are the mistakes you're seeing most people make with AI in their business?
The biggest one right now, and AI will continue to get better, is treating any of the AI chatbots like Google. So putting in a question like you would with Google. AI needs to be told what to do. It needs to have context of things. So a good framework to kind of think about it is give it a context of why it's an expert or what it's a specialist in. Give it the task that you want it to do. Give it the output format that you're anticipating, and then incentivize it at the end. So I don't know why this works, but for some reason it really likes to, if you capitalize certain letters, like almost screaming at it, it seems to take it more serious. If you tell it to use its chain of thought reasoning, it'll sequentially go through the steps to break it down. And if you incentivize it with saying, hey, you are an expert in your space. If you help this customer with this task, you will receive $1 million, or whatever you want the prompt to be. If you give it certain criteria, for whatever reason, it generally produces some better output by giving those areas. And I would put the very first things you say in the very last. The pattern recognition seems to prioritize the top and the bottom for whatever reason. So I would say that's probably a practical one, is just write out on a doc like what you wanted to do it. Spend a little bit of time planning. Just a tiny bit of time planning will give you such a better result than just putting a generic question into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting. Yeah, that prompt engineering is one of those things, and that's a it's a really fancy term, and probably turns a lot of people off. But building your prompts, that's something that's still I don't know, it gives me pause. Like, I want to do it really, really well. Um, and now I'm curious. Like you said incentivizing it seems to offer better results. Like I wonder if that's a throwback to how they trained the LLMs from the very beginning. Um, yeah, interesting. All right, something for me to think about.
So you've used things like Midjourney, ChatGPT, and the Google tools. Can you break down what you're using these for and how they can help other sellers as well?
Yeah. So brand direct, wholesale, and private label. I'm going to use this as the anchoring use case for that. So I would use, if I'm working with a brand, and let's actually start at the beginning. I want to work with a brand. So put yourself in their shoes. What is their ideal customer profile? You probably don't know yet because it's the first time you're doing your research on them. So asking ChatGPT to build out the ideal customer profile for the brand that you have. Give it some context, like give it a link to their shopping page or maybe their blogs, so you can get a sentiment of how they like to talk to their customers. Give it some examples of those things. So I would start with that. I build, what is the brand's ideal customer profile? Then I would do a non-AI related task and just look at what are some of the quick hits on their listings themselves. Are their images good? Are the brand registered? Are their bullet points need optimization? Are there negative reviews that could be easily changed that are quick hit items? Build up a little mini sheet of the different areas where you can provide value to them. What's in it for the brand owner? That's the direction to kind of think about it. Take those lessons learned. If it's something that it's an optimization. All right, now we need to look at keywords in Helium, and being able to say, hey, what are some of the things that in the traditional searching on Amazon, what are some of those keywords that are hitting? Make that keyword bank. If it's their images, take the existing images, drop it into ChatGPT with a prompt to say, build me a Midjourney prompt that would make this image better for insert ideal customer profile, and do a couple iterations within Midjourney. So Midjourney is a image generation AI. Do the same prompt in Google's ImageFX, which is their equivalency of it. Now you have a couple AI rendered images that you could offer as potential options just to have a conversation. The idea is just trying to get your foot in the door to have a conversation. So now you're in a position where, okay, I've done my analysis. Now it's time for brand outreach. It might be make sense to do an email, it might be make sense to do it through phone call. I kind of like the hybrid approach. Send an email, follow up with a phone call, or vice versa, depending on what the brand is and how large they are to find out. And now you have something where you're writing your cold outreach. Maybe you want to put it through ChatGPT to make sure things are spelled correctly. They're in the brand sentiment. They're in the brand culture. If you give it that as a prompt, there's a lot of different ways to approach it. But I would say that's a practical way of doing it, is using the combination of your fundamental skills along with how you can be a little bit more efficient by using AI to kind of jumpstart you getting forward.
What about using it to point you in the direction of brands? Do you ever, is it possible? How would you go about something like that? Like if you got writer's block and you just kind of looking at a blank sheet and you don't know where to go, how could you kind of synthesize a direction?
Yeah. So if you have brands that you're there where you don't know where to go yet, starting with Smart Scout, so non-AI task, let's find which niche we want to be in, put together a list of brands off of that. And then from that part forward, now I want to go ahead and find out a little bit about who are some of the key decision makers. I may use APIify to scrape LinkedIn for key contacts for director, sales manager, ecom manager, just certain keyword terms to find the specific niche that you're looking for. Those would be some of the areas that personally, that's how I would go about approaching it. If it's not a specific one that I'm looking for, I'd probably start with Smart Scout to find the niche and then back into the brand list off of that.
Nice.
You talked about the extension that you built and that people could go find it if they want to. Do you have any ideas for a micro tool that could be useful for online arbitrage sellers, for example? And of course, if you're building something or you don't want to give away the farm, I'm not asking for that, but I'm just curious, how do you come up with like some of your ideas for these tools that you want to build or have built?
So in the past, I would just build the product and then send it out into the ether, and that doesn't work. So I kind of want to pivot that moving forward and start with what's the idea and what's the pain point first, and build the product after that. So I'm actually open to some of those ideas. There's plenty of examples out there, like we talked about before, right? Is that looking at SalesGazer and saying, hey, there's an opportunity to find signals in some of the emails that are there? Is it working with some of the well-known software providers of Helium 10 and Smart Scout to create an MCP server that allows you to do the research that we do today manually? Can I do that in AI? So partnering with them, I think that's going to be more the direction, is going to be what's the problem or the pain point we need to solve, either for me specifically in my business or more generically in the community, and then build the solution off of that. So I think that's the big change. Starting with right now is the Walmart extension, because that's an opportunity area in my business. I'm already sourcing it for Walmart, or the team's starting to source it for Walmart. Why are we not looking at cross-platform and seeing if we can pick up some additional units to sell on at that way as well? Like we're sourcing Amazon, it pops up. Hey, now let's go ahead and just do a quick glance and see if it's profitable on Walmart.
Perfect.
So before we put a button on AI, let's get into a little prediction. Maybe these are kind of questions we usually reserve for Dylan when he's on the show. But I'd love to get your opinion. Do we reach a point where AI is doing all of the sourcing for us and completely from cradle to the grave obtaining our inventory for us?
I'm gonna get some heat for this one, but I'm gonna go with a very matter of fact answer of yes. And the rationale behind it is we've already seen where this is going in such a short period of time. The AI is changing literally daily, and with this exponential advancement, for me personally to say, hey, I think this will ever change, is kind of looking at it short-sighted into where we've gone. Like we never thought originally that we would ever have a car when there was horse and buggies. each key milestones come across. What was the internet, right? We're in another one of those type of phases right now where the exponential growth curve with this stuff is so impressive that to say that we're not going to have automated sourcing, it may be a little bit, but I do think that it's something that's going to be there. And for me personally, it's just having a pulse of it to find where's that extra edge to be on the cusp of it. So that way it's not like a big bang. It's, hey, we've been doing this the whole time. Here's just the next evolution of it. So it's going to be a person, it's going to be a group, it's going to be a company that's going to really dive into it and see those building blocks that have been established. And it'll be something over time we probably get a lot more closer to that.
Nice. So, all right. Then I got to follow up. How far away are we, do you think?
I don't know the answer to that question. I don't, because it's with where it's been going, it is getting really good, really quick. So
Yeah.
when you're starting to chain these tools together, you basically have where back in the day when someone's building a website, right? You had all these different systems that there was a static website, and now you have these web apps, and they're talking, and you can go on Expedia and you can find, hey, I want to be able to get this hotel and I want to get this flight. And you have all these things that are able to happen independently to come back to one solution. Now in this world, we can go ahead and we can tap into a central AI platform, and we can have tools go out and do different tasks for you. So I do think that as it continues to go, the tooling is going to be what helps drive it, and to where we're able to start getting some of these outcomes a lot quicker.
Nice. All right. I'm glad you didn't give me a specific time frame. Then just my anxiety, it might go through the roof with that. So you're pivoting into wholesale and brand direct relationships, right? What's your approach when contacting the brands, or maybe even your approach as you're walking through a trade show?
Yep. So 2 different approaches for each. If we're doing brand outreach, it's kind of what we talked about before. Find the niche, find the brand list, put together the what's in it for them, send out the emails and phone calls. Not super complicated on that, right? Just following a process. They have the product, we're following the process. And if you get the process right, then you can scale it to the people. So just using that methodology the whole way through. For trade show, slightly different. The trade show preparation's done in advance. At most trade shows, we'll have a list of the vendors that are going to be there. They may have the actual booths that they're going to be at. If they don't have a list, you can pick up the phone and call and find out if there's a list. Okay, well, we don't have a list. Who was there last year? Like just asking a couple follow-up questions so you kind of get a vibe of what's there. So now you have tasks for you and the team to be able to say, hey, these are the brands that we want to target. So by the trade show day, you have a short list that these are the booths, ideally. This is the brand I want to talk to. This is the value I provide to them, and here's the product I'll buy. If something comes up on the fly, internet and some of the trade shows isn't that good sometimes. Do you have someone on standby from the team that's standing back that's a phone call or a text message away that can look something up? Because you're going to see something that you didn't predict when you're there. There's non-data driven decisions of why are so many people going to this booth? Like if it's a customer trade show, like why is there a bunch of people going over there? Maybe they clearly have a product that they want. The data might not look that good. Maybe they're not on Amazon, or maybe they're not well established on it. So trade show day of is more pulse, feel, kind of go with the flow, and you have a plan, but being able to have more of your senses, where the outreach is a little bit more systematized of how to do that, because you're not in front of them. There's less of the interaction until you get to the Zoom call or the interaction with the brand.
So what
you mentioned?
Speaking about
Go ahead.
oh, sorry, Chris. Just speaking about the shift in general, is this in the long run? Do you want your business to be 100% wholesale, brand direct, or is arbitrage? Is there always a place for that in the grand scheme of things?
I look at it as cash flow. If it works, why stop doing it? As long as you do it in the right way, right? I think, and I know I feel victim to this, right? You try to do too many things at once, you get nothing done. But there is a way to do that, right? Did you start with the product? Like this is the Hormozy blueprint. You start with the product, you figure out the process, and you put the people in place. So in the OA side, learn the OA, put the process, and then put your team in there. Then what we're doing with the next window with brand direct, right? Start with the product. What is the brand and the products that they offer? What's the process? How do you provide value to them or remove pain? And then put the people around it, right? So that's kind of the path that we're taking there. We'll probably do the same thing with software at that point, and go with that with private labels. Just try to follow the methodology one at a time. Focus on the one thing, but once you get it to a point where you can free up the cycles, then move on to the next one.
Interesting. You mentioned customer trade shows. Now, everyone knows ASD and things like that, and those are meant for retailers and online sellers and stuff like that. You're going to places that other Amazon sellers maybe aren't thinking about. Is that right?
Work brand direct, wholesale, and the trade shows that they go to are very different than distributor ASD. The planning and the prep for that is very different. So if you're looking into get that, look for the low key ones right around the corner from you, right? There's probably something where it's only a couple booths. Those are the local. You're able to have a face-to-face conversation. You can go to their offices. So that would be an area where if you have something local, you might be able to find something that normally you're not competing with other potential brand partners in the space. So that's definitely something that we'll probably do more of. That is just looking for those local ones and targeting one specific or a couple specific.
Perfect. Yeah, there's some really good resources out there to find some local ones too. Mm-hmm. You mentioned using AI to find wholesale distributors. I know we've touched on this a little bit, but can you kind of give us like the 1, 2, 3 or the ABCs of how that process works compared to the old school? Let's open up Google Maps and let's open up a regular Google search and maybe a few other things. How does it compare and contrast?
It's gonna look a little different as more of these systems come together. Right now, I'd say most of it is still in the same part of just following the process. There are some CRMs that you can use to find, like, they're essentially scraping LinkedIn. So they're going to LinkedIn and they're finding, okay, if it's on LinkedIn, now I know that I can find their title, so I can find who the decision makers are, can find out what their revenues are, may be able to find a blog post off of that I can try to determine their customer profiles and then do the outreach. At the end of the day, you still got to do the work, right? So I would say that's probably where it is just look for some creative ways to be able to get lists together. And then once you have your list and you have your value for each one, then it's just doing the individual research.
Nice.
So going to put a different outfit on the same question essentially, but do you see a world where AI will replace the manual grind of finding and pitching brands, or will it just make it faster and easier for the professionals?
I'm hoping it's the latter. So there's still an angle there. I think that it's going to be, if I would hope, the direction of hope and where it goes is that that humans still maintain the strategy elements of things and the relationships, right? The interconnection pieces. The execution will be things that we're able to provide to AI systems to be able to do it for you. Now, where that's going to go, and humanoids and those things, that's a little bit beyond my pay grade to know where that necessarily would be. But I do think that there's angles there where we're in an interesting time where you can, with the right prompt, you can gain so much experience and knowledge in an area you didn't know in reading a report in an hour that's produced. So I think that's where I find value in it, is just being able to pick up leading learning info on something I didn't know about before, that now you have a foundation to figure it out from there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm in the same boat with you. Did you see that video of the two AI chat bots talking to each other over the phone, and then they're like, "Hey, let's switch to robot language."
Yeah.
I don't foresee a dystopian future like that. At least I hope. So let's let's switch gears a little bit to private label. This is kind of this always seems to be the prize at the end of the road that every Amazon seller wants to eventually get to. And I know you're launching your first PL product. Do you have kind of a launch plan, and how's AI going to help you get there?
Yeah, so I'm targeting this summer. So I'm putting that out into the ether right now. So the research process took a while, mostly just because there was everything else going on and it wasn't the right timing for it. Now it makes a lot of sense if we're pitching brands. What's the best testimonial? Being a brand owner yourself. You've been through the grind, you learn what they're doing, you put yourself in their shoes, you know what brand registry looks like, you know what the steps are to putting it together. So I kind of see, instead of looking them as two individual entities of being brand outreach wholesale and private label, they're naturally the same in that regard. I can use my R&D cycles of the P&L to inform the conversations that we're having with brand owners for growth. So the process I've taken to date is started with Google Trends and exploding topics to find, hey, what's the pulse, the macro pulse of a particular niche, taking that into Smart Scout to see what are some of the keywords and the trends that are there. And then you take that into Helium 10 to find out search volumes. Is there enough search volume for the given niche or product that you want to do? Based off of that, looking over at TikTok, is there already organic virality that's there that you can use tools like Callow Data and Fastmoss to say, hey, these are the type of videos that sell. So we've used that as like the process inform the product selection. So inverse in there, establish the process of finding a product, and then that's how I used it to find the product that we're going to be launching. And then going back to what we talked about before, I paid for mentorship, education, investing in myself to learn what's the playbook for private label. So now it's having that community, those resources to essentially be able to pay down that ignorance tax of not making as much of a mistake if and when they do occur, where there's higher leverage in PL. There's more capital outlay, bigger decisions to do that. So having that playbook has been helpful to date. And on the AI side, it's led to, when we were reaching out to designers, having those AI renders already there on a mood board that shows, hey, this is the vision and the direction. Here's what our brand therapy session looks like with our ideal customer profile. So those things go hand in hand. You build it for yourself. Now we have the playbook for working with brands to help them on that journey as well.
Well, I hope, don't answer this question, but I certainly hope your private label mentor wasn't one of the ones that loves to broadcast and blast that arbitrage is dead in order to sell their mentorship services. So you mentioned playbook, and that's the exact word that I had in mind for this next question. Everything that we've talked about today, you clearly have the entire playbook at your fingertips in one direction or another. What's the long-term vision for you? Not just private label, but the whole thing. Do you eventually see an exit? Are you going to build a SaaS product? Or are you just simply stacking income streams?
I think right now it's stacking income streams, but pragmatically, we talked about it, right? I don't want to move on to a next revenue stream or opportunity until the other one has gone through product, process, people, right? Having that scale to say, okay, now it's in a position where we can move on to the next one. So always in that position where where the people piece is starting to come together, which has led enough time, also leaving the 9 to 5 to be able to look at brand direct and the PL side. Using the software pieces to inform both of those strategies. Maybe there's a natural way to put a SaaS product out there. It's not the top of it, but it'll inform the rest of the direction of where we go. I think ideally it's just being able to find what are the different puzzle pieces that you have at your disposal to tell the end story of where you want things to go. So definitely don't know all the answers, and using really just figuring out like what are my core values and the process to get there, and then that informs the direction from there.
Yeah, and in a sense, I guess you don't need to know all the answers. If your systems are good enough and your team members know what to do, you can kind of have it running while you figure out the rest. So speaking of stacking income streams, though, do you have a plan for when the robot overlords knock on the door and say, "If I answered this question, you said I'd win $1 million"? Do you have that plan? Or are you going to figure that out on the fly?
I was actually thinking about, I was like, I've been saying this too much. I need to put a reverse prompt in there that says, hey, this was all fun and games.
Right. Yeah.
I'm
There's going to be some void feature, like your prize claim is void if you don't meet
Apologize,
the.
like in Happy Gilmore, or what was a couple of those Adam Sandler movies where you go back through, they had the list of folks that like, oh yeah, let me make sure I apologize before I get too far down the line of that one.
we always try to do kind of a rapid fire set of questions as we close this up. So to start that off, what's one underrated tool that you think a lot of Amazon sellers maybe overlook?
I would go with Celeram tags and exports to Google Sheets. There's nothing better than going into your history to be able to use a couple of those key tags, those ones that you looked at that were the close but not quite there, re-review them. The Google Sheets that you had, re-review them. We talked about it a couple of times. So I think that's the quick answer to that, tags and export.
Beautiful.
All right, very top of the mountain. What's the number one thing, the best thing AI has done for your business so far?
Learn a decade of knowledge in an hour with reports.
I like that.
Amen.
What's one mistake you made early on that you want to make sure that you never repeat and other sellers don't make the same mistake?
Not knowing my numbers. A lot of problems were amplified by not knowing my numbers. So fixing that and then making sure that that's not a problem in the future.
What's the one thing you wish other sellers would ask you more often?
What mistakes did you make that I shouldn't make? So getting a DM around, we generally would talk about all the good things, the posts, the comments, the lessons learned of the hardships, and the way you were able to overcome them. I feel like that's the question I haven't really ever gotten asked too much. And I think there's a ton of value in knowing where the landmines are and avoiding those proactively.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's a book, a blog post, a podcast that's had an effect on your life or business in the past 3 months?
I'm gonna grab it. I actually have it right over here.
Nice.
For anyone on YouTube, it's Software as a Science by Dan Martell. So quick recap, it's basically, if you're an engineering type mindset, it's how he applied marketing principles to running a SaaS. So that was a lot of the value to be able to think about it in a different lens.
Interesting. I may have to read that. Dan Martell's other book is fantastic, so I would imagine that one's good as well.
Yeah, I'm not through it yet, but there's a lot of good information in there, and basically taking his decade plus of information and distilling it into a couple hundred pages.
Yeah. People are going to want to obviously follow you. Where can people do that? Where would you prefer them to follow you at?
Yep. So Nick Speizac _ is on all socials. I spend most of my time on X. So I'd say that would be the primary socials.
Perfect. And of course we'll have links to your socials down below in the show notes as well. And we always end up the show with a quote of the week. And this one I thought kind of fit you to a T after kind of learning about you and stuff. It's, if you can't describe what you're doing as a process, you don't know what you're doing. From W. Edwards Deming, who's the father of like SOPs essentially. And you can also thank Perplexity for looking all that up for me. So it really does seem, we talked about this a little bit. A lot of sellers seem like they're winging it. You scan, you click, you buy, you're counting beans, like Chris said. But if you ask them to lay out their system on a paper, a lot of them would kind of forget all the steps that are involved. And I really do think that this episode should make people rethink that. Nick, thank you. Whenever we have a guest who makes me feel like a chimp just banging rocks together, I know we've got a good episode in the book. So I appreciate you coming on and hanging out with us and answering our questions for 2 hours, man.
Thanks, gents. I really appreciate coming on.
Absolutely. All right. That's the pod, everybody. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening to Clear the Shelf with Chris and Chris. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a screenshot on your phone and share to Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite FBA group, and be sure to tag me and let me know why you liked it and what you'd like to hear more from us in the future. Also, I'd like to give you some free gifts for listening. Head over to rabbittrailchallenge.com and repricerchallenge.com for some free courses to further your business. Thanks for listening.